There's something deeply unsettling about abandoned asylums. Maybe it's the way time seems frozen behind rusted doors and shattered windows, or the silent screams that still echo through paint-peeled hallways. According to some urban historians, over 90% of the psychiatric hospitals built in the early 1900s have since been shut down, leaving behind ruins filled with shadows, mystery, and sometimes something else. Tonight, we're diving into the dark past of 3 such places. These are first-hand accounts, stories shared by those who dared to explore, work, or live within the walls of these forgotten institutions. These are 3 disturbing true asylum horror stories. Do you believe in ghosts? Not just campfire stories, but the kind that leave a permanent chill in your soul? I didn't. Ghosts, hauntings, whispers in the dark, pure fiction, I thought. Entertainment for late-night scrolling. That comfortable certainty evaporated in the summer of 2014. It wasn't just challenged, it was shattered. And honestly, I'm still picking up the pieces. I was 22, a film student working on my final documentary project. My subject? The haunting allure of abandoned places. Sounds artistic, right? Looking back, it just sounds reckless. My best friends, Mark and Katie, were roped in to help. Mark, the history geek with a dark sense of humor. Katie, the practical organizer who usually kept us grounded. I was the one with the camera, obsessed with capturing the vibe. Our chosen location, Waverly Creek Asylum. Even the name felt heavy. It was a sprawling, forgotten red brick institution deep in the Oregon woods, swallowed by time and nature. Its history was predictably grim. Built in the late 1800s, it saw decades of suffering before a devastating fire in 1979 sealed its fate. Dozens of patients died, trapped in the blaze. The official cause was murky. Faulty wiring? Maybe arson. The result was absolute tragedy. The asylum was shuttered, abandoned, left to the woods and its own dark memories. Legends clung to it like the suffocating ivy on its walls. Locals called it cursed, spoke of disembodied voices, strange lights, and an overwhelming aura of despair. Voices in the vents was a common tale. We heard the stories. Mark even found some creepy online accounts. We laughed it off as local folklore, spooky stories to keep kids away. Standard abandoned building hype, we figured. We were dangerously wrong. The drive there felt like crossing a threshold. Paved roads dissolved into dirt tracks barely reclaimed. From the forest, the air itself felt different, thick, damp, smelling of decay. When Waverly Creek finally loomed out of the trees, it stole our breath. It wasn't just derelict. It felt malevolent. Broken windows stared like empty sockets. Black stains marred the brickwork. A heavy, watchful silence pressed in on us as we got out of the car, our slamming doors echoing unnaturally. Even Mark was quiet. Katie just crossed her arms, looking uneasy. The first day inside was textbook urban exploration. We found an easy entry point through a collapsed wall. Inside, dust, decay. Silence punctuated by the scuttling of unseen things and the moan of wind through broken glass. We filmed. For hours. Long, panning shots of shadowed corridors, close-ups on peeling paint and rusted, forgotten objects. The atmosphere was thick with sadness, undeniably creepy. Every floorboard creak, every cold spot kept us glancing over our shoulders, but it felt like the natural creepiness of a tragic place, not something other. We joked nervously, trying to maintain our sense of adventure. As evening approached, we made the crucial mistake. Instead of camping nearby as planned, Mark pushed for staying inside. Get the authentic experience, he urged. Katie was reluctant, but the thrill, and perhaps my own eagerness for dramatic footage, won out. We chose a large room in what seemed like the old administrative wing. Relatively clear floors, seemed structurally sound. We didn't know, couldn't have guessed, it was situated directly above the basement morgue. The thought makes me sick. A night fell hard inside those walls. The familiar daytime sounds warped into something sinister. Wind moaned like grieving voices. Settling creaks sounded like footsteps just out of sight. The darkness felt tangible, suffocating. We huddled in our sleeping bags, lantern beams cutting small, inadequate circles in the immense blackness. Our earlier bravado was long gone, replaced by quiet apprehension. Eventually, exhaustion claimed us. I woke up with a jolt, heart pounding, instantly awake, instantly aware that something was wrong. Silence, absolute and profound, pressed in. Then, I heard it, faint, muffled, like someone trying desperately to cry without being heard. My first thought, Katie, a nightmare. I sat bolt upright, straining my ears. Katie, I whispered. No answer. My shaky flashlight beam found her and Mark both fast asleep. Across the room, the sound came again, a low, ragged sob thick with misery. It wasn't in the room. It was echoing from the hallway, seeming to emanate from the very structure around us. An icy dread, colder than any draft, gripped me. This wasn't wind. This wasn't an animal. This was pure, concentrated sorrow given sound. I hissed, shaking them awake. Listen! They stirred, confused, then froze as the desolate cry drifted through the darkness again. No one needed convincing. Fear, sharp and immediate, jolted us fully awake. Sleep was impossible now. Driven by a terrifying mix of fear and morbid curiosity, we grabbed our flashlights and crept out into the hall. The sobbing acted like a beacon, pulling us deeper into the asylum's decaying maze. It would fade, then swell, always seeming to originate just beyond our sight. Flashlight beams jittered across peeling walls and gaping doorways. The air grew noticeably colder. The sound led us down a grim, narrow corridor towards a heavy, rust-streaked metal door. A broken sign clung precariously, the visible letters spelling Ward B, Isolation. As we approached, the crying stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with anticipation. Then slowly, with an agonizing creak that echoed in the stillness, the door began to swing inwards. Not by any draft. The air was dead still. It opened as if inviting us in, as if we were expected. Hesitantly, we pushed inside. A small, foul-smelling antechamber led to 3 tiny cell-like rooms. Doors hung brokenly. 2 were empty shells of crumbling plaster. The third stopped our hearts. A rusted metal bed frame held a rotting, stained mattress. Leather restraints were bolted to the corners, cracked and stiff. But it was the wall above the bed that held the true horror. Scrawled in what looked like charcoal or soot, looking disturbingly fresh against the ancient decay, were 3 words. I'm still here. We didn't need to speak. Panic took over. We turned and fled, stumbling blindly back the way we came, our breath catching. In ragged gasps, every shadow seemed to leap. Every noise behind us sounded like pursuit. We burst back into our camping room, frantically shoving gear into bags, not caring about order, only escape. We didn't stop running until we were outside in the cool, pre-dawn air, gulping it down like water. The asylum stood silent behind us, a dark monolith against the lightening sky. We drove away in stunned silence, the rising sun feeling like a mockery. Days later, back home trying to salvage something for my project, I started reviewing the audio recordings, boosting the gain on the tracks from that night. I heard it clearly through my headphones, the same muffled sobbing we'd heard in the hallway. But then something else emerged from the background noise, faint whispers threaded between the sobs. A woman's voice, thin and reedy, filled with an eerie insistence, repeating the same chilling phrase, "He never left. He never left." Mark couldn't let it go. He dove into research, cross-referencing, asylum records, fire reports, old news articles. He found her, Eliza, a patient confined to Ward B, isolation for nearly 10 years before the fire, committed after the death of her infant son, suffering from severe psychosis. Notes detailed her inconsolable weeping and how she would scream for her son at night, convinced he was still in the building. Staff reported her constantly whispering to the walls. The fire started near her ward, and the final, sickening detail, because of staffing issues and her history, the night of the fire, Eliza had been chained to her bed in that room. She died there, trapped. He never left. She wasn't talking about herself being trapped. She was talking about her son. That documentary never got made. We couldn't face going back, couldn't face the footage we already had. That experience fundamentally altered my perception of reality. The casual skepticism is gone, replaced by a gnawing unease, a knowledge that some things, some places, operate by different rules. I still have trouble sleeping in complete darkness, and sometimes in the dead quiet of the night, in that space between waking and dreaming, I still hear it, a faint residual echo of sorrow, A whisper just at the edge of hearing. I'm still here. He never left. Waverly Creek Asylum didn't. Just hold on to its pain. It etched itself onto us, and some etchings never fade. My story takes place in 1996. I was 38, working as a state building inspector in New Jersey. It was mostly a boring job. Checking codes, writing reports, the usual grind. Predictable, safe. Nothing that prepared you for the exceptions. The assignments that stick in your mind forever. Like the day I got assigned to Marlow Ridge Psychiatric Hospital. Even the name felt heavy. Marlow Ridge wasn't just another abandoned building. It was a local legend, whispered about, feared, closed. Since the 60s, left to decay, it was finally slated for demolition. My job, a final safety assessment before the wrecking crews arrived. Check for hazards, structural issues. Standard procedure, but this place was anything but standard. I'd heard the rumors naturally. They called it the House of Mirrors, not just idle talk. Back in the 1950s, a Dr. Martin Feldstein ran controversial mirror-based exposure therapy there. He believed forcing disturbed patients to confront their reflections for hours would somehow expel the madness. Imagine the torment, staring into your own eyes when your mind is already broken. The stories claimed it caused more harm than good, pushing patients deeper into despair. The hospital's closure felt linked to the shadow of those experiments. I arrived late afternoon, the sun low, casting long, eerie shadows. The building loomed, dark brick against a fading sky, windows like vacant eyes. It felt like approaching something wounded, waiting. I only had a few hours of daylight, just enough for the required lower floor inspection. The power was long dead. I brought a heavy-duty flashlight and a backup clipped to my belt. Felt essential standing there. Getting in meant finding a gap in the fence and a pried-open side door. The screech of rusted hinges echoed in the sudden, thick silence inside. The air hit me. Decay, damp plaster, mildew, and a faint, cold, metallic tang. Dust motes danced thickly in my flashlight beam. The quiet was absolute, pressing in, making the crunch of debris under my boots sound unnaturally loud. I started on the ground floor, moving methodically. Lobby, offices, common rooms, all decaying, trashed, graffitied. Creepy, sure, but expected. I focused on my checklist. Beams, water damage, asbestos signs. Keep busy, keep the unease down. Then I headed towards the east wing, reportedly where the therapy rooms were. The deeper I went, the colder the air felt, a damp chill unrelated to the weather. The silence shifted, feeling less empty, more expectant. I found the hallway and instantly understood the nickname House of Mirrors. Rooms lined both sides and nearly all featured mirrors. Wall-mounted mirrors, some intact but grimy, others cracked like spiderwebs, many completely shattered. Shards littering the floor. Walking down that corridor, my own fractured reflection flickering back from every doorway, was deeply unsettling. The air felt heavy with old suffering. I checked a few rooms, empty, desolate cells radiating despair. Then I reached room 214, just another faded number on a grimy door. I pushed it open. The room was small, claustrophobic, stripped bare except for the large mirror bolted to the far wall. It dominated the space, filthy, streaked, but undeniably reflective beneath the grime. Complex network of cracks radiated from near the center. I stepped inside, sweeping my flashlight beam around. Floor, ceiling, corners. Just doing my job. That's when my flashlight sputtered. Not died, but flickered violently, plunging the room into momentary darkness, then flaring, faltering again. My stomach tightened. This was reliable equipment. The strobing effect was disorienting, shadows leaping like phantoms. And then, as the light momentarily steadied on the mirror, I saw him, not my reflection. Standing in the mirror, seemingly just behind me, was a figure, tall, skeletal, thin, wearing pale, old-fashioned hospital clothes. His skin was waxy, deathly pale. The worst part was his head, tilted at a sickeningly unnatural angle, lolling as if his neck were broken. He wasn't looking at the mirror, but out of it. From my space, pure terror, cold and sharp, washed over me. Without thinking, I spun around, flashlight beams slashing wildly through the empty room. Nothing, just decaying walls, dust, oppressive, emptiness. My breath ragged, heart pounding. Shadows, I told myself, stress, the damn rumors, but I had to look back. Drawn by a horrified fascination, I slowly turned, raised the flashlight, its beam now steady, back to the mirror. He was still there, unmoving. The tall, pale figure with the broken neck, occupying the space in the reflection I'd just frantically confirmed, was empty. It felt impossibly real. The door slammed shut, a violent final bang that echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. Panic flooded me. I lunged at the door, fumbling with the rusted handle. It wouldn't budge. Locked? Jammed? I threw my shoulder against it. Solid as rock. Trapped. A sharp cracking noise from behind made me spin. The mirror. A new fracture snaked across its surface, originating from the figure's reflection. Then came a whine. High-pitched piercing, filling the room like grinding metal, vibrating in my bones. Then, whispers. Starting faint, then growing louder. Dozens, maybe hundreds of voices, mumbling, chanting, pleading, laughing madly. A swirling cacophony of despair pressing in from all sides, from the very walls, from the mirror. My eyes were fixed on the figure in the glass. Through the terror and noise, I saw it move. Slowly, it raised one pale, thin hand, long, skeletal, fingers unfurled, and it pointed directly at me. The world tilted. The whispers roared. The whine became unbearable. The pointing finger. The last thing I saw before darkness rushed in, swallowing everything. I blacked out. I woke to dim morning. Light filtering through the grimy window. My head throbbed. My neck ached. I was slumped against the wall near the door. Disoriented, fragmented memories surfaced. The door was wide open, a clear path out. My main flashlight lay dead beside me, but the backup on my belt, untouched. Still working. I hadn't even thought to use it. The room was utterly silent now. The presence, the sounds, the figure, gone. Only the smell of decay remained. I scrambled up, muscles screaming, and bolted. Out of room 214, through the decaying halls, not stopping until I burst outside into the cold morning air, gasping. I couldn't file a full report. Saw ghost in mirror, room locked itself, heard voices. They'd have me committed. I wrote the minimum, unsafe. Structural hazards, east wing compromised, recommend immediate demolition. Let them deal with it. Weeks later, needing answers, I did some digging. Old records, archives. Learned more about Dr. Feldstein's mirror sessions, and about room 214. It was one of his main therapy rooms. Then I found the incident report. A patient, Jonah Reeves, unable to bear the treatment, had hanged himself. In room 214, his admittance file description: tall, thin build, pale complexion, cause of death, asphyxiation, neck broken. I never went back. The building was demolished that winter, wiped from the landscape, but not from my head. Sometimes, even now, I catch a flicker in a mirror, a shape in a reflection, out of the corner of my eye, just for a second, enough to bring back that cold dread, enough to make me wonder if I ever really left room 214, or if a reflection followed me out. My name is Daniel, and I spent 3 years from 1972 to 1975 inside the walls of Ravenhollow Asylum. It's taken me decades to say that without a tremor in my voice, without the crushing weight of shame. But I did my time there, came out the other side technically. But there are things, experiences from that place that I've locked away, buried deep, things I've never told a soul, until now. Maybe saying it out loud will lessen the grip it still has on me. Maybe. I was admitted when I was 17. The official papers read, "Major depressive episode with anxiety features." Sounds clinical now, almost tame. But back then, in the early 70s, mental health wasn't discussed. It was hidden. It felt less like an illness and more like a stain, a personal failing you had to be scrubbed clean of. My parents, bewildered and scared, listened to the doctors who recommended inpatient care. Ravenhollow was supposed to be the place to fix me. They put me in Ward D, designated for young males, mostly teenagers like myself, maybe early 20s. The ward itself was a long, echoing corridor lined with heavy doors. The whole building felt perpetually cold, a damp chill that seeped into your bones regardless of the season. It smelled overwhelmingly of industrial bleach, a harsh chemical scent constantly fighting a losing battle against an underlying odor of damp decay, old sweat, and something else. Something vaguely metallic and unsettling, like old pipes or maybe something worse, But the worst part? It wasn't the smell or the cold or even the bars on the windows. It was the silence. Raven Hollow had this heavy, oppressive silence, especially at night. It wasn't peaceful, like silence should be. It felt watchful, like the building itself was holding its breath, listening, waiting. The only sounds were the distant clang of a gate, the squeak of a nurse's rubber-soled shoes on the linoleum, or the occasional muffled sob from behind a closed door. Sounds that only emphasized the vast listening quiet around them. From the very first week I felt it, a wrongness that went beyond my own troubled mind or the inherent sadness of the place. It started subtly. At night, after lights out, lying rigid in the narrow, uncomfortable bed, I'd hear it, scratching, faint at first, coming from behind the thick plaster walls. But it wasn't the quick, skittering sound of rats or mice. This was slower, more deliberate, a methodical scrape, 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 like something with intention was dragging itself along the cavities within the walls. I wasn't the only one who heard it. Whispers circulated among the patients in Ward D during rec time or huddled in corners away from the orderlies. We compared notes, fear flickering in our eyes. Was it pipes settling? Old wiring? We tried to rationalize it, but the sound was too rhythmic, too persistent. One patient, a wiry kid named Lenny who had been there longer than me, had his own theory. His eyes would dart nervously towards the ventilation grates near the ceiling. He called it the man in the vents. Said he heard it moving above. Sometimes felt cold air waft down when nothing else was moving. We mostly dismissed him. Poor Lenny, we thought. More delusional than the rest of us. His talk just added to the general unease. Until one morning, Lenny was gone. His bed was empty, neatly made. The staff were tight-lipped. The official story, whispered down the hierarchy, was that he'd escaped, managed to break out somehow. We were warned not to discuss it. But later that day, someone noticed the vent cover in Lenny's vacant room. Heavy metal grate, bolted to the wall. Two of the thick bars were bent outwards, warped as if forced from the inside. Nobody escaped into the vents. The story didn't add up. The scratching noises seemed louder after Lenny vanished, and the watchful silence felt deeper, colder. That's when I started seeing things. Or a thing. It would happen late at night, in that heavy darkness just before sleep. Or sometimes, I'd wake abruptly, heart pounding, and see it. A shape in the far corner of my small room. It was always the same. Vague at first, coalescing out of the deepest shadows. Taller than a man, unnaturally thin but solid somehow. It had no discernible features, no face, no clothes I could make out. Just an outline, an upright silhouette that was somehow darker than the surrounding darkness, absorbing the faint light trickling in from the hallway. It never moved. It just stood there, watching me. The first time I cried out. An orderly came, flicked on the harsh overhead light. The corner was empty. He just sighed, told me to go back to sleep, maybe jotted something down in my file about night terrors. I tried telling my assigned therapist, Dr. Evans, a man with tired eyes and a perpetual frown. I described the figure, the feeling of being watched. He listened patiently, then adjusted my medication dosage. Higher, stronger sedatives. Manifestations of your anxiety, he explained, calmly. Your mind is playing tricks, Daniel. The medication will help quiet those thoughts. But it didn't quiet them. It just made me feel foggy, disconnected, and even more trapped. And the figure? It still appeared, sometimes clearer, sometimes just a flicker at the edge of vision, always watching. One night, the terror escalated. I woke up completely paralyzed. Not just groggy, locked in. I couldn't move a muscle, couldn't turn my head, couldn't even scream, though a silent one was ripping through my mind. Classic sleep paralysis, I know that now. But what came with it wasn't textbook. I felt it, an immense pressure on my chest, heavy, suffocating. And then, a presence leaning over me, right over my face. I couldn't see it. My eyes were fixed on the stained ceiling tiles, but I felt its proximity. Felt a cold, foul breath ghost across my cheek. It smelled faintly of dust, earth, and that same metallic rot that lingered in the asylum's hidden corners. I lay there, pinned, helpless, for what felt like an eternity. Pure, undiluted terror coursing through me. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure lifted, the presence receded, and I could gasp for air, finally able to move drenched in cold sweat. Sleep paralysis. they said again when I breathlessly reported it, but the feeling of that presence, the cold breath, that wasn't just my mind. Around this time, other patients in Ward D began to deteriorate. Rapidly, it went beyond the usual ebb and flow of mental illness. Boys who had been conversational became withdrawn, mute, staring blankly for hours. Others developed sudden, violent night terrors, their screams echoing down the corridor. Fights broke out over nothing. The atmosphere grew thick with fear and suspicion. The staff seemed overwhelmed, resorting more often to sedation and restraints. One boy, Jimmy, barely 16, usually quiet but friendly, completely broke. We found him one morning huddled in the main hallway outside the ward doors, rocking back and forth, eyes wide with stark terror, unresponsive to the orderlies trying to coax him up. He just kept muttering the same phrase over and over, his voice hoarse. He walks between the walls. He chooses at night. He walks between the walls. He chooses. They dragged him off to the isolation wing. We never saw Jimmy again. His words, "he walks between the walls," resonated chillingly with the scratching sounds, with Lenny's "man in the vents." The final year, 1975, felt like a slow collapse. More incidents, more unexplained occurrences hushed up by staff. Morale, already low, plummeted among both patients and the weary orderlies. Rumors flew about funding cuts, investigations. Finally, the state stepped in and ordered Ravenhollow closed. The official reason cited was persistently unsanitary conditions and inadequate patient care standards. Convenient, believable even. But those of us who had lived in Ward D, who had heard the scratching, who knew about Lenny and Jimmy, we suspected the rot went deeper than just peeling paint and bad plumbing. They didn't want to admit something worse was happening within those walls. I was released shortly before the final closure, deemed stabilized, with a diagnosis revised to something less severe and a bottle of tranquilizers. Stepping out into the sunlight felt surreal, like emerging from a tomb. Freedom. But I never truly left Ravenhollow behind. It came with me. The nightmares were relentless for decades. Sometimes it was the faceless figure in the corner. Sometimes the feeling of paralysis, the cold breath. Often it was just the sound, that slow, deliberate scrape, scrape, scrape echoing in my dreams. Then last year I saw a small news article online. The old Ravenhollow Asylum building, derelict for decades, was being renovated into luxury condos, ironically. During the gutting process, construction workers made a discovery. Inside the wall cavities, particularly around the old Ward D section. Bones. Human bones. Dozens of them, fragmented old. Some analysis suggested they belonged to adults, but others were small, disturbingly small. Children. There were no hospital records of patient deaths or burials that matched the number or nature of the remains. No graves on the grounds accounted for them. They were just hidden, sealed away, between the walls. Reading that sent a chill down my spine, colder than any Ravenhollow night. I thought about Jimmy's terrified chant, "He walks between the walls," about Lenny and the vent bars bent from the inside, about the scratching, about the figure darker than darkness. Maybe it was all just a product of collective psychosis, a folie à deux amplified by the grim environment and our fragile minds. Maybe trauma and fear gave shape to something that wasn't truly there. But every now and then, usually late at night when the house is quiet, I hear it again, or I think I do. A faint scratching sound from just behind the drywall. Scrape, scrape, scrape. And I wonder if Ravenhollow Asylum is really gone, or if the thing that walked between its walls just found somewhere new to hide. Abandoned asylums are more than just crumbling ruins. They're time capsules of forgotten pain, filled with the echoes of voices long silenced. Tonight, you've heard just 3 of those voices. 3 souls who crossed the thin line between memory and the unknown. What do you think happened in those hallways? Hallucinations? Trauma? Or something far more sinister? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And remember, when darkness lingers in forgotten places, sometimes it lingers for a reason. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep whispering in the dark.